Welcome back, everyone. We're going to be taking a deep dive into some stuff you guys sent in. It's really interesting about the anxieties that different generations experience.
Okay.
Yeah, you gave us this really thought-provoking YouTube discussion with a historian,
Hmm.
and then also an article that really focuses on baby boomers.
Interesting.
So we're going to kind of see if we can connect all of this to like historical cycles and, sort of bigger societal trends.
Wow, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so get ready for some aha moments.
I'm ready.
So this historian that we're going to be unpacking makes a pretty bold statement right out of the gate.
Okay.
He says that Gen Z has 90% less buying power
Wow.
than a baby boomers did at the same age.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's a huge difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly reflects like a shift in our economic realities over time.
Yeah.
The post-World War II era was this time of huge economic expansion, especially for the baby boomers.
Mm.
But the world has changed so much.
Yeah.
Globalization and automation, rising inequality, it's a totally different landscape for younger generations.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And the article about the baby boomers entering retirement kind of shows this picture of a generation that benefited from that booming economy.
Right.
So they're used to like a certain level of security and prosperity,
Of course.
And so it's no wonder that they're feeling like anxious about the future.
Absolutely.
It's almost like they're entering a world that they barely recognize.
Totally. And their anxieties are rooted in those experiences.
Yeah.
Just as, Gen Z's anxieties are rooted in their very different experiences.
Right.
And that's where the historian's theory about this recurring secular cycle in Western history becomes really interesting.
Okay, so this is where things get a little wild.
Okay.
He claims that Western societies go through these cycles of boom and bust,
Interesting.
marked by population growth and then economic inequality, and then ultimately some kind of major crisis.
Oh,
And get this, he says that these cycles peak roughly every 250 years.
that's a bold claim.
It is.
But it's interesting because when you look at history through that lens,
Yeah.
you can see some compelling examples. Like in the 14th century, the Black Death ravaged Europe.
Right.
And then in the 17th century, there was the devastating 30 Years' War.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, there's the French Revolution in the late 18th century.
Right.
These are all periods of massive upheaval and change.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this.
Yeah.
But, I mean, are we really in one of these cycles right now?
Well, the historian certainly seems to think so.
Okay.
He points to things like wage stagnation, the fierce competition for the best jobs.
Mm.
And if you think about it, in your own life, have you noticed those trends playing out at all?
You know what? Yeah, I actually do.
Interesting.
It feels like it's getting tougher and tougher to just make ends meet.
Yeah.
Even with a good job, it's like you're constantly struggling to keep up.
And that's exactly the kind of experience this historian is talking about.
Right.
He argues that these individual struggles are actually symptoms of a much larger societal shift.
Okay, so we've got these potential cycles of societal growth and decline, right?
Right.
But then there's another piece of this puzzle that doesn't quite seem to fit,
Okay.
which is this population paradox.
Oh, interesting.
So we're seeing a huge oversupply of labor at the same time that birth rates are plummeting in developed countries. So how does that even make sense?
Yeah, it's a fascinating contradiction, right? Because
Yeah.
on one hand, you've got more people entering the workforce than ever before.
Right,
Women are working in much larger numbers than they used to.
right.
Globalization has just intensified competition.
Yeah,
Automation is replacing jobs. And then immigration is also adding to the labor pool.
right. So more workers, but fewer jobs.
Exactly.
So that explains kind of the oversupply of labor, but what about the declining birth rates? What's driving that?
Well, the historian has a rather unsettling theory about that, too.
Okay.
He calls it mouse utopia, or their psychological Black Death.
Mouse utopia. Okay, now I'm intrigued, but also a little scared.
Yeah, it is a little creepy.
What is he talking about?
So it's based on this experiment where researchers created a utopia for mice.
Okay.
They had everything they could possibly want or need, unlimited food,
Nice.
perfect living conditions, no predators.
Sounds like a pretty good life.
Yeah, mouse paradise, basically. And at first, the mouse population just exploded.
Okay.
But then things took kind of a dark turn. The
Oh,
mice stopped reproducing.
really?
They became withdrawn and antisocial.
Uh-huh.
They started exhibiting all these strange behaviors, and eventually the entire colony collapsed.
Wow, that's disturbing.
It is pretty disturbing.
But how does it relate to humans? We're not
Right,
mice.
we're not living in cages with unlimited cheese.
Exactly.
But the historian's point is that our urban environments, while they offer many advantages, may lack the crucial social structures and support systems that humans need to thrive in the long term.
Wait, so he's saying that modern life, with all its comforts and conveniences, might be contributing to these declining birth rates.
That's exactly what he's suggesting.
Wow.
And, maybe your anxieties aren't just about economic insecurity, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps they're also connected to this deeper sense of unease.
Huh.
Maybe you're feeling the loss of those traditional support systems like close-knit communities or extended families
Right.
that provided a sense of belonging and purpose in the past.
Okay. I need a minute to process that. This
Yeah.
is getting deep.
It is. And it gets even more complex when he brings religion and traditional gender roles into the picture.
Okay, now we're getting into some potentially controversial territory.
We are, but it's important to hear what he has to say.
Okay.
He argues that religion and traditional gender roles, while often seen as outdated or even harmful,
Yeah.
actually played a vital role in creating social stability throughout history, and
Yeah.
that they provided the necessary friction that pushed people to grow,
Interesting.
to contribute to society, and to find meaning
Okay.
beyond just their own immediate needs.
So he's saying that maybe those old-fashioned structures weren't so bad after all.
Well, he's not saying we should go back to the way things were,
Right.
but he is suggesting that we might be losing something valuable
Yeah.
by abandoning those structures altogether.
So what does he propose we do?
Right. How do we find that necessary friction in the modern world
Yeah.
without going back in time, right?
Exactly.
And that leads us to his most provocative concept,
Okay.
which is toxic femininity.
Hold on. Toxic femininity. I'm a little hesitant to even go there.
I understand your hesitation,
Okay.
but it's crucial to approach this concept carefully and with nuance.
Okay.
He's not blaming women
Okay.
for societal problems, okay? He's trying to understand how certain behavioral patterns, which he believes are more common in modern Western societies,
Yeah.
might be contributing to social dysfunction and, individual unhappiness.
Okay. I'm willing to hear him out, but I'm going to need you to break this down for me a little bit.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to start by emphasizing that he's not saying all women are toxic.
Okay, good, because that would be a pretty tough sell.
Right.
Yeah.
He's specifically looking at certain behaviors
Yeah.
that he argues have become more prominent in modern societies,
Right.
particularly those with a strong emphasis on individualism and consumerism.
Got it.
And he believes that these behaviors can be harmful to both men and women,
Okay.
even though they might appear harmless on the surface.
So, what are these toxic feminine behaviors he's talking about?
So he uses this acronym GSR,
Okay.
gossiping, shaming, and rallying, to describe this pattern of relational aggression
Oh, okay.
that he sees as becoming, increasingly common.
So it's like weaponizing social pressure. Mm-hmm.
to manipulate or control others.
Exactly. And he argues that this type of behavior is often driven by envy, a desire for social status,
Okay.
a lack of accountability.
I can see how that could be toxic, regardless of gender.
Right.
Yeah.
And he also talks about hyperconsumption as a form of toxic femininity.
Oh.
He sees this relentless pursuit of material possessions and status symbols as a way of seeking validation and attention, often at the expense of genuine connection and personal fulfillment.
Yeah, I think we've all fallen into that trap at some point.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pervasive pressure in our culture.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in the consumerist culture and lose sight of what really matters.
And the historian argues that this hyperconsumption is also fueled by insecurity and a lack of genuine self-worth. It's a way of trying to fill a void, but it never really works.
So how do we break free from this cycle?
Yeah. How do we cultivate a sense of self-worth?
That isn't dependent on external validation or material possessions.
Right.
That's a great question, and it's something we'll explore, further in our deep dive.
Okay.
But I think it starts with becoming more aware of the messages that we're bombarded with every day.
Yeah.
Like the subtle and not so subtle pressures to conform, to consume, to compare ourselves to others.
Right.
And once we're aware of those pressures, I think we can start to like resist them
Yeah.
and create like a more authentic and fulfilling life for ourselves.
That makes sense, but it's not just about individual choices, is it?
No, absolutely not.
Like, there are larger societal forces at play here.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this historian's work so compelling.
Yeah.
He's not just offering like individual self-help tips.
Right.
He's trying to understand how these like individual struggles are connected to like these larger historical cycles and societal trends.
Okay, so let's talk about the cycles. You mentioned that he believes that we're currently in like a period of decline. So if that's true, what can we do about it? I mean, are we just doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
Well, I think, this historian doesn't believe in determinism.
Oh, right.
He thinks we have agency,
Okay.
even in the face of these cyclical patterns. And he believes that by understanding history, we can learn from the mistakes of the past
Okay.
and make more informed choices about the future.
So it's not about predicting the future. It's about using history as a guide
Exactly.
to help us navigate the present.
Exactly. And he also stresses the importance of like cultivating personal resilience.
Okay.
He believes that in a world of, increasing complexity and uncertainty, it's essential to develop this like strong inner compass
Yeah.
and to find meaning and purpose beyond just, material comfort and security.
So it's about finding that necessary friction within ourselves.
Yes.
Those things that challenge us, inspire us, connect us to something larger than ourselves.
Yes, exactly. And he also talks about the importance of like building strong communities and relationships based on shared values and, mutual support.
Right.
He believes that in a world that's becoming increasingly fragmented and individualistic,
Yeah.
it's more important than ever to like foster a sense of belonging and interdependence.
It's like we have to rebuild those traditional support systems that have been like eroded by modern life, but in a way that's relevant to our current needs and values.
Precisely. And those communities can provide like a powerful antidote to the isolation and alienation that a lot of people feel in modern society.
Oh. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about historical cycles, economic shifts, the mouse utopia experiment,
It's a lot.
the role of religion and traditional gender roles, and even, this concept of toxic femininity.
Yeah.
My head is spinning.
You bet.
But I'm starting to see how all these pieces kind of fit together, and it's both fascinating and a little terrifying.
It is a lot to process.
Yeah.
But I think the key takeaway here is that we are not powerless. Even in the face of these complex challenges, we have choices.
Okay.
We can choose to become more aware,
Yeah.
more resilient, more connected. We can choose to focus on what truly matters and to create, a more meaningful and fulfilling life for ourselves.
That's a hopeful message, and I think we could all use a little bit of hope right now.
Absolutely. Hope is what fuels us to keep striving, to keep growing, to keep searching for a better way.
Yeah.
It is a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
These ideas about like cyclical societal patterns and, the anxieties of different generations
Yeah.
and the potential downsides of our modern, like hyper-individualistic world.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together,
Yeah,
but I have to admit it's a little unsettling.
it can be. It can be.
Yeah.
But remember, knowledge is power, right?
Right.
By understanding these forces, we can start to like navigate them more effectively
Okay.
and maybe even find ways to like create a more fulfilling and sustainable future.
Okay. I like that. Let's talk a little bit more about this mouse utopia experiment.
Okay.
It really captured my imagination.
Yeah.
But I'm still not sure I totally understand how it relates to us.
Well, it's a powerful analogy for what the historian calls the problem of abundance.
Okay.
So when the mice had everything they needed to survive and thrive,
Mm-hmm.
they stopped striving, they stopped connecting with each other in meaningful ways,
Right.
and ultimately they stopped caring about the future of their community.
So he's suggesting that abundance, whether it's material wealth or personal freedom, can actually be detrimental
Yes.
if it leads to a decline in social cohesion and purpose.
Exactly. Think about like your own life, right?
Mhm.
Have you ever achieved a goal that you were really striving for,
Okay.
but then felt a little bit empty afterward?
Yeah, like what's next?
Right, what's next? And the historian would argue that that's because we are wired for challenge,
Yeah,
for growth, for something bigger than ourselves.
that makes sense. when we lose that sense of striving and connection,
Hmm.
we lose a part of ourselves.
Right. And this brings us back to the historian's point about religion and traditional gender roles.
Okay.
He's not arguing that we should return to those specific structures,
Right.
but he is saying that we need to find new ways to create that necessary friction,
Okay.
that sense of purpose and belonging that those structures used to provide.
So it's about finding the right balance
Mm.
between individual freedom and social responsibility,
Yes.
between, personal fulfillment and contributing to something larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. And that leads us back to the historian's provocative concept of toxic femininity.
Okay.
Remember, he's not saying that women are to blame for societal problems.
Right.
But he is highlighting certain behavioral patterns that he believes are more common in, like modern Western societies,
Yeah.
and which he argues can have negative consequences for both men and women.
Okay, let's unpack this a little further.
Okay.
You mentioned the GSR pattern, gossiping, shaming, and rallying. Can you give me some examples of how this might play out in real life?
Sure. Imagine you're at work
Okay.
and a colleague gets promoted.
Okay.
Instead of celebrating their success, you spread rumors about them,
Oh, wow.
trying to, undermine their achievements.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe you constantly criticize a friend's choices,
Right.
making them feel insecure and self-conscious.
Yeah.
These are examples of toxic femininity in action,
Right.
even if they're not always conscious or intentional.
I can see how those behaviors could be incredibly damaging,
Yes.
especially in the long run.
Yeah.
And you also mention hyperconsumption as another form of toxic femininity. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. Think
Yeah.
about, the pressure to have the perfect Instagram feed,
Oh, yeah.
the latest gadgets, the designer clothes.
Okay.
This relentless pursuit of external validation
Yeah.
can lead to a cycle of dissatisfaction and emptiness.
Right.
You're always chasing the next thing, never feeling truly content with what you have.
I think we've all fallen into that trap at some point. It's so easy to get caught up in the consumerist culture
It is.
and lose sight of what truly matters.
Exactly. And the historian argues that this hyperconsumption is often fueled by, insecurity
Yeah.
and a lack of, genuine self-worth.
Right.
It's like a way of trying to fill a void,
Yeah.
but it never really works.
So how do we break free from this cycle? How do we cultivate a sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on external validation or material possessions?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it's something, that we'll explore further in our deep dive.
Okay.
But I think it starts with becoming more aware of the messages that we're bombarded with every day.
Right.
The subtle and not so subtle pressures to conform, to consume, to compare ourselves to others.
Right. And once we're aware of those pressures, we can start to resist them and
Exactly.
create a more authentic and fulfilling life for ourselves. But it's not just about individual choices, is it? I mean, there are these larger societal forces at play here.
Absolutely, and that's what makes the historian's work so compelling.
Yeah.
He's not just offering individual self-help tips.
Right.
He's trying to understand how these individual struggles are connected to, larger historical cycles and societal trends.
Okay, so let's talk about those cycles.
Okay.
You mentioned that he believes we're currently in a period of decline. So if that's true, what can we do about it? Are we
Yeah.
just doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
Well, the historian doesn't believe in determinism.
Okay.
He thinks that we have agency, even in the face of these, cyclical patterns.
Okay.
He believes that by understanding history, we can learn from the mistakes of the past
Right.
and make more informed choices about the future.
So it's not about predicting the future.
Yeah.
It's about using history as a guide to help us navigate the present.
Exactly. And he also stresses the importance of cultivating, personal resilience. He believes that in a world of, increasing complexity and uncertainty,
Yeah.
it's essential to develop a strong inner compass.
Right.
And to find meaning and purpose beyond just material comfort and security.
So it's about finding that necessary friction within ourselves. The things that challenge us, inspire us, connect us to something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. And he also talks about the importance of building strong communities and relationships based on shared values and mutual support.
Okay.
He believes that in a world that's becoming increasingly fragmented and individualistic,
Yeah.
it's more important than ever to foster a sense of belonging
Right.
and interdependence.
It's like we have to rebuild those traditional support systems that have been eroded by modern life, but in a way that's relevant to our current needs and values.
Precisely. And those communities can provide a powerful antidote to the isolation and alienation
Oh, yeah.
that many people feel in modern society.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about historical cycles, economic shifts, the mouse utopia experiment, the role of religion and traditional gender roles, and even the concept of toxic femininity.
That's a lot.
My head is spinning, but I'm starting to see how all these pieces kind of fit together.
Yeah.
And it's both fascinating and a little terrifying.
It is a lot to process, but I think the key takeaway here is that we are not powerless.
Okay.
Even in the face of these complex challenges, we have choices.
Okay.
We can choose to become more aware, more resilient, and more connected. We can choose to focus on what truly matters
Yeah.
and to create a more meaningful and fulfilling life for ourselves.
That's a hopeful message.
It is.
And I think we could all use a little bit of hope right now.
Absolutely. Hope is what fuels us to keep striving, to
Yeah.
keep growing, to keep searching for a better way.
So much of what we talked about feels like so big,
Yeah.
like historical cycles, societal shifts.
Mm.
But you said earlier that like we have agency,
Right.
that there are things we can do, even if it feels like we're like caught up in all this.
Exactly.
So where do we even start?
Well, I think it starts with like small conscious choices,
Okay.
like becoming aware of those like external pressures
Mm-hmm.
that are shaping our thoughts and behaviors, and then making like deliberate choices to resist those pressures.
Can you give me an example?
Sure.
Yes, what does that look like?
Well, think about like the information that you consume.
Oh, okay.
We're constantly bombarded with news headlines, social media posts, marketing messages,
Right.
all designed to like trigger our anxieties and insecurities.
Yeah.
So one small step you can take is to become more like discerning
Okay.
about what you allow into your mind.
So like fact check those headlines. Be wary of clickbait.
Exactly.
Spend less time scrolling through social media.
Exactly. It's about choosing like quality over quantity
Right.
and being mindful of the impact that information has like on your mental and emotional well-being.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about the historian's emphasis on building strong communities?
Mhm.
I live in a big city
Right.
and it feels like everyone's so isolated,
Yeah.
focused on their own lives.
It can be challenging, but it's not impossible.
So how do you even like begin to build community in that kind of environment?
Well, it doesn't have to be like this grand sweeping gesture.
Okay.
It can start with something as simple as like striking up a conversation with your neighbor,
Oh, okay.
joining a local book club, volunteering for a cause you care about.
So it's about like seeking out those opportunities for connection,
It-
even if they seem small.
Absolutely. It's about making that conscious effort to like step outside your comfort zone
Yeah.
and reach out to others.
Right.
And remember, you're not alone
Right.
in feeling this need for connection.
Yeah.
A lot of people are craving a sense of community and belonging.
Right. Especially in today's world.
Exactly.
It makes me think about the historian's idea of finding that necessary friction within ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
how do we cultivate that sense of purpose and meaning in a world that often feels like so shallow and materialistic?
Well, I think it starts with asking yourself some like big questions.
Oh,
What are your values?
oh,
What are you passionate about?
right.
What kind of impact do you want to have on the world?
Yeah.
And once you have a clearer sense of your own like inner compass,
Mm-hmm.
you can start to like align your choices and actions with those values.
So it's about like living a more intentional life.
Exactly.
One that's guided by something deeper than just like pursuing pleasure
Yes.
or accumulating possessions.
Exactly. And it's about finding those things that like challenge you,
Right.
that push you to grow and learn and become like a better version of yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe it's taking on a new creative project, learning a new skill, or committing to, a cause you believe in.
I have to be honest, I'm still feeling a little overwhelmed by everything.
Yeah,
It's a lot to take in.
it is.
If you had to sum it all up in one key takeaway,
What would it be?
I think the most important message is this. You are not powerless.
Okay.
You have the ability to make choices that shape your life, your relationships,
Mhm.
even your community.
Well,
You can choose to be more aware,
Mhm.
more resilient, more connected.
Yeah.
You can choose to focus on what truly matters
Right.
and create a more meaningful and fulfilling life for yourself.
That's a powerful message.
It is,
And it gives me hope.
as it should.
Yeah.
Hope is essential. It's what fuels us
Yeah.
to keep moving forward,
Right.
even when the road ahead seems uncertain.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive.
Yes.
It's been an incredible journey, and I'm grateful to have had you as my guide.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for taking this journey with us.
Remember, these big ideas that we've explored are just the beginning.
Keep questioning,
Mhm.
keep exploring,
Keep learning.
and keep diving deep.
Until next time.